In a democracy, citizens need to be informed. Informed about policies, issues, homelessness, law enforcement, and social services. In order for people to make good decisions that affect their lives, they need to be informed. Conversations with Erroll Parker.
Professor Amen Rahh is the Professor Emeritus at California State University in Long Beach in Africana Studies. He has been associated with that department since beginning in the early 70s. He has championed many causes, African-American causes, in Long Beach and in Compton and in Southern California. He's really a legend in terms of supporting black students and black athletes and speaking to power in terms of the plight of African Americans. Welcome to our program, Professor Rahh.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
We were with each other years ago on my original television program.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you're back on air because you're one of the most authentic programs that represented the Long Beach area and just issues that you brought forth that affected life and the issues that the Long Beach community, specifically the African American community, face. And so I'm just happy that you're back on. I'm honored to be here.
I'm glad that you took time out of your busy schedule to have this conversation with us. We were together 50 years ago at Cal State Long Beach, and we saw the struggles that even occurred before we got there. And we want to talk about the struggles that African American students had there prior to us coming, and the continuous struggle that African American students and student athletes have. How would you characterize this struggle? First, let's talk about the past. Prior to us coming in 1968, there were only a few African Americans going there, and mainly athletes. What caused the influx of African Americans on that campus?
Well, everything that all progress during the 60s of African Americans was a part of the what we call the liberation movement, which was in two phases, civil rights and black cultural development or empowerment, the Black Power movement that joined with the civil rights movement. And both of those had a profound effect on what was going on in predominantly white campuses among black students. They changed their names from Negro students to Black Student Union. But what happened at Cal State Long Beach in 1967, Clyde Taylor, who was a faculty member, approached some students to start a Black Student Union. He didn't call it Black Student Union, he just said a black organization. They had another integrated organization prior to that. But based on what was going on in campuses all over the country in 1967, Ivy League and major universities, Clyde Taylor, a professor of literature, decided that he wanted to get the students at Cal State Long Beach together. So he approached some of them, they got together and they began to start what was called the Black Student Union. And that was in 1967. They were probably the most profound, one of the most progressive student organizations among the Cal State systems. What made them progressive was, of course, Clyde Taylor's guidance, along with Dr. Joe White, and they sort of gave them directions based on what was going on in other campuses. So they chose the name Black Student Union. And then, because they were debating on what they was going to call themselves, and they settled on Black Student Union. This is according to a letter I got from Laura Murphy, how she described it, who was one of the, what they call board members. So they, I mean, they were just very progressive. They were very progressive in their demands. And then what really aided them was that there was a movement on the outside of the campus.
In the community.
Yeah, because Laura in her letter said that the majority of the students at Cal State Long Beach did not come from the Long Beach area. But what happened was EOP, Educational Opportunity Program, under the leadership and guidance and help of Dr. Joe White, that set forth Long Beach to be, some say was an experimental program there, but it opened the door for students to come of color, because Long Beach was probably, and still is, one of the most racist institutions in the world, even though they try to camouflage it. But it's very, very racist. And when I say racist, I ain't talking about they didn't like black people. They had policies, customs, and traditions that sort of limited enrollment.
Give me an example of that. You said policies that were instituted by the administration that was really opposed to black people.
Well, first of all, the admissions policy, they would not needed EOP, Educational Opportunity Program. Second, that they was in Southern Orange County, they was in Orange County, on the border of Orange County, and they were very discriminatory in housing. Students
yes.
couldn't get housing, or faculty couldn't get housing.
Yes.
Adults couldn't get housing, just people around the campus. It was they're right next to the Veterans Administration, and they never thought, they didn't build one brick with the intentions of having an influx of black students. So at one time, you was close to 17% of the black population of the campus. It was one of the biggest campuses, 35,000, went up to about some thousand students. And black students made maybe 1,700, 1,800 at its max. But they were powerful because of their influences of what was going on at Cal State Northridge, what was going on at Cal State San Francisco,
yes.
what was going on at San Jose State. You had the rebellions of the black athletes with the 1968 boycott. You had the assassination of Martin Luther King. You had in 1968. So even though they initiated in 1967, their demands and their growth under the leadership at that time, Tony Wilkins and the board, they just knew what to do and how to do it. And they were very progressive in getting things done for students there.
How did you get involved with the African Studies or Black Studies Department, the Black Student Union, and EOP?
Well, I came there with the consciousness. I was one of the founders of the Black Student Union at Compton College in 1967. And when I got to Cal State Long Beach, Jerry Tarkanian offered me a scholarship to come there.
The famous basketball coach.
Yes, and that's why I went there. I went there to play basketball. But I was an activist before then. I was a young man total democracy. I got arrested during the Watts Rebellion in 1965, did 45 days in junior high when I was in high school. And so there was a movement in Watts. I grew up in Watts. I went to Ritter Elementary, 99th Street. I went to Markham for a semester, and then I ended up in at Bunch Middle School. But the point is, I was active because we were active. WLCAC started the Watts Community Action Agency. And then you had
Ted Watkins' group.
Watts Manufacturing right across the street from Centennial. You had the Watts Parade, the Watts Summer Festival. So I came there with credentials. Tarkanian used to tell the joke all the time that when he brought recruits on, the players he recruited to school to visit the campus, all of them wanted to know where EOP office was, where financial aid was, where the gym was. And the first thing I asked was, where was the BSU? And so I met Laura, Valerie, we all went to Bunch together. So they told me—
Bunch Middle School? Junior high school, yeah.
Bunch Junior High, and we were close.
Yes.
And so I was, at that time, involved with Vanessa Harris, who was Joella, who was a board member of the BSU. So they invited us up the summer of '68 to meetings off campus. And I was elected Sergeant of Arms in the BSU at that time. But I could not commit, there would be no Black Studies Today or Africana Studies Today if it wasn't for the BSU. There would be no EOP program if it wasn't for the BSU and the other students. See, BSU was the leader, but you had people like Walt Clemens and the Kappas, you had other organizations that were there.
Supporting all that.
Omegas and Semegas, and then Black students at random. And because at one rally in 1968, the summer of 1968, I had 500 students march on the president's office. That couldn't have been the BSU because they didn't even have but
yeah, a few members. That's right.
So that showed
that the community was backing the efforts of the students on the campus.
We took the community to the school and brought the school to the community.
Now, you became a professor in the African Black Studies Department. And when did it become the Africana Studies Department as it is now?
About in 2007 maybe, 2000.
When Maulana Karinga, was it Karinga or CSULB?
Well, he was the chair. No, Dr. Malloy was the chair at that time. You know, I think, see, Black Studies went through transition. Yeah. First of all, it was student-driven and student-supported, and they had a strong relationship. That's what kept the progress of the students. Then the schools began to crack back, and they took the power away from ELP. ELP used to could admit students.
That's right.
And now, you know, not a lot, but they could admit maybe 5, 10%, 20%. And then they took that away. So then they began to engineer what type of black students they wanted. So they started looking for students that did not come from the urban area. You see, and
so that was a conscious effort for them to do that.
They made the admission officer at Cal State Long Beach a vice president, so that other vice presidents couldn't use their influence to get students in school.
Okay.
And this guy, he made a conscious effort to make sure that students, you know, would come there and say, I had no racial problems or discrimination problems. So they were very selective in the geographics, but that was the issue there. But you can't give enough recognition for the leadership of the BSU and the Black Studies Student Association and the various student leaders that existed there. It was so diverse in leadership.
Now let's talk about the student athlete. You were a student athlete coming from Compton, and you were highly recruited by Jerry Tarkanian. Tell us about what you understand the plight of the student athlete prior to you coming, which I know you had a lot of research on, but then it was a golden era in athletics, not only in football but in basketball. But tell us the plight, and track and field, yeah. Tell us the plight of the student athlete. Were they exploited?
Well, you got to understand, Cal State Long Beach wanted to expand.
Yes.
They couldn't expand because they were a Division II. So the whole conference, the PCCA, was a Division II in basketball and in football. And that means that they were not a major campus. They had great athletes, John Rambo, D. Andrews, who you just had on the program, Willie Martin, Jim Richardson, all of those individuals. But they wanted to expand because they saw money.
That's right.
If they could field gyms and field arenas and compete on a national level, that's what gives your school recognition, and that's how they win. So I think it was Bob Miller, Miller recruited Tarkanian to be, they went from a Cal State college. Remember, when we went there, it was Cal State College.
That's right.
And so they developed a Division I basketball and Division I football.
By bringing in a lot of talent.
Well, they had to, because in order to compete, they wanted to bring in, you know, top athletes. They didn't give us full scholarships. They gave us half EOP grants and half scholarships. And it was a struggle, so they, you know, but the point is that we were winning. Our basketball team never lost a home game. Sam Robinson was the first Division I to be drafted.
In the NBA.
Yeah, George Trapp was the first to be a #1 draft choice. Leon was the first Division I to be drafted in football.
That's Leon Burns.
Yes, and took him to their first bowl. He retired his jersey, and then, as I said in the crackback, they unretired his jersey. So, you know, but they still couldn't fill the arenas that they wanted to on a consistent basis. Big games, we would go to the Long Beach Arena, and we could get a few thousand and things of this nature. And every now and then, by maybe 2 or 3 games, we sold out. But for the most part, it was hard to get people. We played in the gym. And so they got rid of football. and in the 80s, and then because it was so expensive. Football carries a whole athletic department. If you can get, that's why they have 50, 100,000 at some of these major universities. When we would travel in basketball, we play in field houses, 14,000, 16,000. When we come home, we play in front of 2,500. It's a whole new different game.
That's right.
They got some of the top athletes. We recruited the Poindexters, Ed Radcliffe, Glenn McDonald, who they just retired his jersey. But they're so discriminatory and so lack of putting money into the program now that the alumni, they do not have a strong athletic alumni or booster program like most schools do. Most schools, when they recruit athletes, it's the boosters that take care of the athletes.
That's right.
At Cal State Long Beach, it's just the financial aid office.
And so they can't compete with the major universities.
No, they're not going to ever be able to do that unless they come up and want to spend money on a top coach like they did with Tarkanian. And Tarkanian was not the greatest coach when he first started. He had to make a transition from community college great coach to a 4-year. And he didn't make that transition really until he went to Vegas.
Now, let's switch wheels back to the political plight of African Americans in this country. We see that it seems to be going back to yesteryear in terms of brutality and discrimination, which concerns a lot of black people at this point. What is your perspective on the plight of African Americans at this time in America?
I think that they've made major gains. There's two parts of politics. There's intergroup politics, and then there's Euro-American electoral politics. To get Obama elected the Million Man March meant voter registration among young black people is high. Voter participation is high. Look what they did in Florida as far as assisting Gilliam in his plight. Look what they did in Georgia. Look what they did to the Democratic Party in giving them the majority. Look at, you got 2 Muslim women, a Native American woman, a Latino woman. All of these people got elected because of the 95% of black registered voters that voted in the various areas that they were in. So that's good, you know. You got a state superintendent statewide in California. There's a lot of good things that's going on. Is the racism with police brutality worse? Yes, because just like Saudi Arabia could get away with murder, and the president don't say nothing about it or want to do. Well, you got a district attorney who's an African American woman, who there's been over 300 or 400 police shootings, and she's not prosecuted one. And you know, people had hopes that she would, but you know, the pressures of the police unions and the politics prevent that. But the point is, Black Lives Matters is demonstrating in front of our office every Wednesday, just wanting to meet with her, and she won't meet with them. But the point is, you have a situation whereas the rise of racism, as Dr. Karenga would say, they always talking about Trump giving dog whistles. But if he's giving dog whistles, they are not really dog whistles, they're human whistles. Because only dogs hear human dog whistles. So we look at that as him signaling to people that it's okay to come out the closet and express your racism in violence and political ways. And you've never, you know, for something that has been something that people kept to themselves or moved into canyons and moved into hills and rural areas, you know, to get away from urban life and suburban life. Now they're coming back in a political sense, and they're voting in high numbers and participating in racial discrimination and militias and in all right white-wing organizations like never before, because you got that president.
Now, Rahh, we look at the decline in the number of African Americans on major college campuses.
Right.
Why is that? I mean, there was a boom 30, 40, 50 years ago where African Americans were coming on campuses. Why is this occurring?
Well, it's called backlash. First of all, these universities never really wanted them there. So all they did was engineer how to stifle.
But they wanted the black athlete there.
Oh, well, well, that's where the exploitation of the black athlete comes. In almost every major area where Trump won, like University of Georgia, Alabama, Wisconsin, and all that, they got 1 or 2%, 3% students. The majority of them are athletes, and they all voted for Trump. I mean, the majority of the people in them states voted for Trump. And voted, just recently, Mississippi just voted for a lady that professed, I'll be at the front row of a hanging, and I voted for the leader of the Confederate to be president, and things of this nature, and they voted for
Mississippi
But these are the same people that would be at Mississippi State game or University of Mississippi cheering for the black athlete to make a touchdown. But when it comes to power and things of this nature, and because of the influx of what they would call immigration, migration of people of color, they are angry at them for coming to their country, realizing that one day they will be the government of the country, and they're trying to stifle that. And the student, but getting back to your point about the student,
that's what I'm getting.
Well, the key to your progress is vocational and educational attainment.
Okay.
If you slow that down, the people are going to do what? They're going to find other ways to make a living, and then.
Okay.
And so they end up what? Homeless. They end up in jail. They end up on drugs, self-medication, and because that's what happens to people that are locked out of opportunities and things of this nature. The system has never really embraced multiculturalism or multi-ethnic system. You can see that right now when they're taking children away from kids at the border.
It's very painful to look at.
Well, and no one is really doing anything about it from the standpoint of massive demonstrations and holding people accountable for this type of activity. And then you're going to put black social workers on trial, and then at the same time never prosecute police in the state of California. So it's a lot of factors that go into why students are not going into it. And then they up the standards. You have to have college preparatory classes.
Yeah.
I really think that, you know, students should go to school part-time and work. But the point, and work full-time, go to school part-time, because you don't want a bunch of loans. They made it difficult for financial aids and grants. At one time, financial aid offices approved you for your financial aid and sent the papers in to the federal government. Now you have to do everything online directly to the federal government.
So you feel like it's a concerted effort on the part of administrations and policymakers to exclude people of color in the higher education?
Okay, well, let's put it like this. Of course, that is how you, in the 50s and the 60s, some of the greatest white athletes were recognized for their performances, but they didn't let blacks participate. They didn't let no athletes of color participate, except for in the Olympics. And they exploited them. They had Jesse Owens and all of them, and they had Jesse Owens trying to outrun a horse when he came back for money, and then selling the cougar rounds for him. The same thing, they exploit you for work. Look at black people that are unemployment today. They weren't unemployed during the Holocaust of enslavement. You can, as long as it's free labor, okay. The same thing with immigration. Here is Schwarzenegger getting an immigrant pregnant that was working for him, and then he's in a party that's anti-immigrant. Trump is married to an immigrant, and her family just came in on the same policy he's against. my point is the hypocrisy of America in saying that you're an American, as Malcolm would say, but not affording you the right. Look at the voter suppression. Look at the gerrymandering in various states to make sure and ensure that black vote don't count. And this is the same thing with these major schools. They found out that if we dissipate the population, we won't have student activism. And if we choose the type of students that we want, they will be more into unconscious activities rather than conscious activity. Let me give you a point. When you was in school and I was in school, Gil Scott-Heron came. We had Minister Farrakhan speaking. We had Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad speaking. We had Dr. Karenga speaking. We had progressive activists speaking on campus. Today, you don't have that. Black History Month, we used to have big programs. Now, the budget, what, a couple $100. Even here in Long Beach, the gay parade gets hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the Martin Luther King parade, be lucky if they get 6,000 or 7,000.
Rahh, what was the single, if you had to look back in your life, what was the single most thing that motivated you to be an activist, to be concerned about the causes that you're articulating right now?
I got caught up in the black movement. There was a movement in 1965 with the Watts Rebellion, and they could like to call it a riot, but it was a rebellion. But leaders sprung up, organizations sprung up, black organizations reached their height. You had multiple community alert patrols. You had the black community woke up. They became self-conscious of themselves and their capabilities. They put on demands, and the government responded to those demands. Teen Post, Head Start, Martin Luther King Hospital came, shopping centers came. They kept talking about, well, you burned down your community, but look at the things that came in absence. Manpower development, where the government, the federal government, paid a certain amount of your salary, and with companies that had government contracts, and they would pay the rest, and you had a job at the end of your manpower development. Yeah. The same thing with financial aid. EOP was an educational opportunity program that could admit you.
Yes, right.
Admit you. Now they said, no, you got to go through this racist institution that says, no, you're not qualified. My son graduated from Long Beach Millikan, applied for Cal State Long Beach. And I know 3 other black males that applied for Cal State Long Beach. They were rejected. I found out that my son's application was on the vice president's desk. What is his application, because he had my name, of course, had on the vice president's desk? My son go to Cal State Dominion, graduate with honors, passed CBET, he's a principal now, but he couldn't get in Cal State Long Beach. There was a number of other African-American students that we tried to get in school that we couldn't get in school. And we had black people in key positions that should have got them and should have been able to have them in. Then there was a shift to, we're just gonna focus on Latinos. So that's what happened, and that's why you have the situation. And many Latinos, many of them choose not, they're more wanting to work with the system than to create challenges. They benefited from us struggling, but at the same time, they didn't, in many ways, develop the unity to work together. In the beginning, we did, with Mecha and La Raza and all of them, but all those organizations are gone.
Well, our time is up. It was a fascinating discussion, and a historical discussion. I'm sure this is going to be played over and over to students and get a historical perspective. But there's one last question that I have that has caused me great consternation, Professor Rahh. You made me lose a lot of money, and I want you to look in that camera. Did you sing with the Whispers when they came to Cal State Long Beach?
No, I did not sing with the Whispers, but we brought them to Cal State Long Beach to do a concert with the first
sang with
concert.
them.
I got on stage and sang with them, and I was emceeing, and people thought I was singing a part of it, but I was not.
I put big money in the barbershop that you was on with the Whispers.
No, but I know them. They're out of Watts.
That's
and
right.
One of the songs that they made was, seemed like I got to do wrong before they noticed me.
Yes.
And they would say that that was a song of consciousness.
Okay.
Because I have to do wrong before you notice me.
I'm just jesting. You know, I've had that live for a long
but
time.
I just want to say this, man. You know, the 6th district that you just had is a historical district.
That's right.
The first black city councilman came there. The first black woman city councilman came there. Martin Luther King Park is there.
Yes,
Martin Luther King statue is there. The historic Coleman restaurant was there.
That's right.
The historic Kelly bookstore was there.
Right.
The historic progress of Long Beach Poly athletics with the Trent Gaines,
VIP
the
records.
Mac Calvins, the John Rambos, all of them went through there that made Long Beach Poly Long Beach Poly.
That's right.
And even the women's coach today, all of the beautiful things that African Americans have contributed to Long Beach, VIP records, all of that, P&G Fish Market,
Snoop Dogg.
all of that was, well, you know, it's not just him. It was a community store. They didn't just sell rap. At that time, they sold, before there was rap, VIP was there. VIP
Rob, we got to go.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being, thank you so much for being on Conversations with Erroll Parker. We had a fascinating discussion with Amen Rahh. We'll see you next week.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, brother. We got the guy. You said you had the guy.
In a democracy, citizens need to be informed about policies, issues, homelessness, law enforcement, and social services. In order for people to make good decisions that affect their lives, they need to be informed. Conversations with Erroll Parker.